We got in late on the first day, so the first real day would be day 2. We decided to take it easy on this day and just explore the local area. We were based just outside Fira, within walking distance of the main town. Fira is based around the outside of the caldera, overhanging the cliff face looking down onto the caldera, so the whole town is arranged on a long line around the edge. The path has spectacular views all along it and continues to Forestanta. I'm sure I'm butchering the name, so I'll add them as text as well. Fira is comprised of a mixture of shops, restaurants, holiday lets and an old church. It's quite hilly with a lot of steps. It's not ideal for people with mobility problems. Fira is also the main port stop of all the big cruise ships. While we were there were a number of cruise ships. It increased from 2 ships on the first day of the week and then to 4 ships by the end of the week. According to the locals, they often have as many as 7 to 8 ships docked at the same time in the peak summer months. Tip: if you want to beat the crowds, I recommend visiting in the morning. We were still on UK time, which was 2 hours earlier than Santorini, so we walked round from 9 to 11. The streets were still quiet as the people had not got off the cruise ships yet. In the afternoon it was very busy and a lot less pleasant with the overcrowding from the tourists. To get to Fira Port there are a long windy set of steps. They are slippery as they've been polished by people walking up and down them. You have to be careful to avoid the donkeys that you could hire to take you up and down, as they aren't well controlled. I disapprove of using animals to carry people, especially because there was very little shade for them. Tip: I recommend getting the cable car. This is very quick, costing €6 per person each way. It does however get very busy with long wait times when the cruise ships are unloading and loading. Day 3. Off to Oia, or Ia as the locals say. Oia is a picturesque town that's in all the advertising for Santorini. It's located at the north end of the island. If you're travelling like us without a car, the easiest and cheapest way to get there is on the unofficial bus called Kettle. I'll put the link in the description. The Kettle buses have 6 routes and 1 from the airport. They're all reasonably priced, ranging from €1.60 to €2.20 per person per journey. You just get on the bus for the destination you want, and the ticket man comes to sell you a ticket while the bus is driving. The buses were clean, with no eating or drinking allowed, and felt safe. The only complaint we had was the ticket man was a little grabby for your money. If you took too long finding the right amount of change, but if you had it ready it was fine. Change was offered. The bus from Fira main bus station to Oia takes about 30 to 40 minutes. Oia is similar to Fira, but is a bit more upmarket. It has a main street of shops with side streets. We visited the Maritime Museum, which was €5 each. The museum is quite small, but has some interesting models on the first floor. Oia is the Instagram capital of Santorini, but there are so many photo opportunities you don't have to wait long to get a shot. We did laugh at some of the poses and outfits people were wearing, as they were more fancy dress than everyday wear. After we got our photos, we stopped for lunch at an expensive restaurant with a great view. Light lunch was about €30 for 2 people. A cup of tea was €6 for example. Refueled, we walked to the windmill that was at the end of the main trail. These had been turned into private rentals, so it was quiet with not too many people. Heading back, we rushed for the bus, but we didn't need to, as another turned up straight after the first left. Day 4. Boat trip day. We had planned which boat trip we wanted when we ventured down to the port on the second day. There are 3 main trips on offer. A 3-hour trip that visited the volcano, the hot springs, and a 6-hour trip we visited the volcano, hot springs and Thracia, and a trip that also stopped at Oia. As we had not pre-booked the boat trip, we got the cable car down to the port early, costing €6 per person, and booked the 6-hour boat trip, costing €30 per person. While waiting for the boat trip, the dock got very busy as the cruise ships in the caldera ferried their passengers to Santorini for a day trip. which created very long queues for going up on the chairlift. After some time being told to stand in one place or another, our boat arrived, Captain John. The water was calm, so boarding was not too tricky, but it was not suitable for people with mobility problems. The boat quickly ferried us over to the volcano, taking about 15 to 20 minutes, docking at the entrance of the trail. The volcano trail was an extra €5 each. The boat trip allowed, if I'm remembering correctly, about an hour to an hour and a half to walk up and down. This was quite tight as I kept stopping to take photos and videos, but most people seemed to be able to make it to the top. The views from the top were impressive, as you could see the other islands that make up the caldera, which are less visible from Fira. The guide offered information about the site, but we preferred to walk at our own pace. From there, we got back on the boat, which took us a short way to the hot springs. It took about 10 minutes. Here we were allowed to swim from the boat. The hot springs came from the mouth of a river, so the boat was moored a little way out into the sea. We had spoken to people who had swam in the hot springs earlier, and they said the sulphur from the hot springs really stung, so we decided to swim just near the boat and not too close to the hot springs. Travelling in May, the water was still very cold. The boat then took us to Thracia, which is another island which makes up the caldera. On Thracia there is a small town which has been largely abandoned as the locals moved over to Fira. There's a main street of restaurants which has sprung up for the boat tourists. We ate at the Windmill restaurant at the end of the promenade. After finishing eating, it was time to go back to the boat and back to Fira. On the return journey, the boat slowly passed Oya so you could see it from the sea. When we arrived back at the port, the cruise ship tourists were all in Fira, so the cable car didn't have much of a queue. Tip: there are toilets in the cable car ticket office which are free, instead of the €1 you have to pay for the toilets on the harbour. We got back on the cable car costing €6 per person and went back up to our hotel. Day 5. Day 5 was moving day. For the past few years we've split our holidays into two, by moving from one hotel to another mid-week. We have found this makes the holiday feel longer. The second hotel was on the other side of the island and Calamira. To get there we used the buses that ran from Fira bus station costing €2.20 each. Calamira is a beach resort town with a long promenade and many restaurants. Each restaurant had a beach section with sun loungers with different designs of umbrellas and loungers. As we were travelling outside of the peak season, they didn't mind us just sitting on the sun loungers and only ordering one drink. They weren't pushy at all. After eating in one of the restaurants, we returned to our hotel and laid around the pool. Our second hotel, Blue Waves, was set back from the beach at the mountain end of the beach. Tatiana, the receptionist, was excellent with perfect English. She was very helpful and welcoming. The room was clean with comfortable beds. We paid £71 on average per night. The room came with a small functional kitchen, but we didn't use it much as there were so many restaurants. Day 6. The other main beach resort on Santorini is Perissia, which is separated from Calamari by the mountain. The guide says you can walk over the mountain, but it takes about 2 hours. Instead we chose to get the boat ferry, which runs from the end of the beach. There is no dock, so the boat seems to beach itself on the stones, and you have to walk through the water and climb up a ladder to get onto it, so not suitable for people with mobility problems. Costing €5 each, the boat took about 20 minutes to go to the other side. It stayed close to the mountain and we got good views of it all the way round. Perissia is similar to Calamari, but is less built up with fewer restaurants and hotels. The black sand seems to go on for a couple of miles, but the further you get away from the main town, the less built up it gets. We spent the rest of the day on sun loungers and having lunch at one of the restaurants, Apollyon. We decided to get the bus back, which involved getting the bus to Fira and then the bus back out again to Calamari. We were lucky with all the buses this week, so didn't have to wait long. It was a little over €4 per person for the whole bus trip. Day 7. By luck, the dates we were away included International Museum Day on the 18th of May. This meant that all the museums on Santorini were free for this event, so we planned our museum day for the 18th. I've put a link in the description which shows the other 3 days for the museums. We visited 2 museums and I'd recommend doing it in this order. The first museum we visited was the Prehistoric Museum located in Fira. This is a medium-sized museum spread over 2 floors. Its main focus was the artifacts dug up from the 3,700-year-old town at Akatori. These artifacts range from small figurines to large pots. Its most prized items were the frescoes taken from the walls of the old city. They were in amazing condition considering their age. From Fira we took the bus to Akatori, again reasonably priced, about €2 per person. The bus dropped you outside the entrance to the archaeological site museum entrance. Again, this was free due to International Museum Day. The whole archaeological site is covered under a purpose-built structure with walkways cutting around the old town. It was nice and cool and provided shelter from the sun. We cheekily joined a tour and was guided around, listening to the information and learning fascinating details such as how old the town was when it was buried by the ash. It is 16th century BC. That's 3,700 years ago. It looked like a modern town with 2-story buildings and plumbing. The town was abandoned shortly before the massive eruption that gave Santorini its shape today. The people never returned and may have died due to events related to the eruption. A short walk from the archaeological site is the Red Beach. A rock slide earlier in the year had cut off the beach, but people had made a DIY trail over the rocks. This was very uneven and even dangerous, but we made it over. The beach itself was quite small, with crashing waves. We found a spot to sit on the beach for a while, before venturing inland to a basic cafe. Before heading back to the hotel, we stopped at a waterfront restaurant by Akatori. It was then 2 buses back to Calamari, costing €4 each person. Day 8. On our last day, we just rested, swam in the pool and laid on the beach. We got the taxi back to the airport, costing €20. This was a very short journey. This is the 3rd and final video in the Santorini trilogy. To see more of what we did for our boat trip day, click here. And to see 30 minutes of relaxing waves, click here.